Hello and welcome, Tom, to the Transformation Evoke podcast, where we discuss metabolic healing and using the ketogenic diet as a metabolic treatment for mental health. I am beyond honored to have you today to sit and discuss your experience with the diet. And I think you have some valuable things to share, and I would love for us to just go over your experience, your takeaways, where you are in the moment, and more. Anything else that you feel like is relatable to someone who may be wondering. We all know how metabolic therapies are kind of like such a new pathway, such a new option that I'm sure people are not sure. Is it safe still? There's so many contradictions, and at the same time we hear those success stories, as we're gonna learn about your experience is one great example of that. And so I guess this is designed to serve someone who may be considering it and wants to know what the path was like. So I appreciate your willingness to share your experience, and thank you again for your time as well. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and where your journey started with maybe like what was life before keto? And I know that's a very wide open question, but feel free to take us to the places that you feel are most important and relative to your experience with the diet.
Well, first of all, Donica, thanks for having me on. My life has changed since I started to get into the ketogenic community with keto lifestyle and the meetups, and I really appreciate what you've done for me in that regard because it's been life changing. As far as me, I'm 58 years old. I have two daughters and a wife, and my journey kind of started back in, I would say, 2001 when I was in the airport, and I'd been doing a lot of travel, and my daughter Madison came up to me right at the airport and was shaking crazy, missing me. So that immediately kind of put me into a form of what I would consider to be a depression, where I felt overwhelmed. I didn't feel like I could be as good of a father as I wanted to be. And so that started, where I started getting into medications for mental health. And I had many things that went on. There was portions in time where I was just like depressed. I was tired. I got a diagnosis of bipolar. I think it was 2 at the time, but I really didn't know the difference between 1 and 2 back then. But my diagnosis for bipolar came about in 2008, and by the time of that was after I had a hospitalization, to be honest with you. And things just kind of ramped up. Hospitalization came, and then symptoms kind of came, like additional symptoms. Some of the symptoms were excessive tiredness, problems with thinking, depression, extreme fatigue, irritability, false or unusual sense of well-being, fear or nervousness, feeling not well or unhappy, feeling things are not real, aggression of feeling irritable or agitated, heat intolerance, delusions of persecution, mistrust, suspiciousness, or combativeness. And what you might find interesting about that list of all my symptoms, they're actually side effects for all the medications that I had and the progression for that. So I just determined that the other day, and I found that to be profoundly informative. I thought the important part about that is, back then when I started and, into the whole psychiatric arena of mental health and medications, I really didn't look at the symptoms that much. I just put all of my emphasis into the doctors knowing what they're doing, obviously more than I did. And that's on me. With this in my life, the irritability and all that, and the things progressing, I was having a hard time keeping jobs. I went from like an executive to being just a laborer at Home Depot, merchandising, overnight, which of course didn't help with my lifestyle. I started at UPS, and that was an overnight, 3 to 8 in the morning, going to college. And then ultimately, one of my last jobs was working overnight again, which, like I said, horrible for the whole mindset, horrible for sleep routines and sleep schedules. Ongoing continued cocktails. In 2016, I almost lost my family. And, they were just getting like pretty fed up. They felt unsafe. And so, just before that, I says, you know what, I have to, and it's weird because where your mindset is at when you're in depression, I wrote myself basically a note on what I needed to do. And with that note, it said, cease life. And then when I went back to look at it, I'm like, whoa, my mindset was just so bad depression that I was looking to cease my life. And then my whole intention was to say, seize life, like take it on. What am I going to do? So I'm vegan for 8 years and I did it cold turkey. And then things really didn't get better. I had 14 months of bedridden depression when my mom died. Um, uh, Back injuries from stress, really stress related, physical related. My life just kind of like kept going in a downward spiral, and continued degradation. So, of course, my wife made a commitment after that 2015 that, I am unwell. I am a loving person. It's just I was kind of down a path that I couldn't find my way out of. So ultimately, in October, bringing us today, in October, my wife had mentioned to me, hey, you know what? I'm starting to see, she actually was on one of the bipolar magazines or something like that. She says, I noticed something from this Georgia Eid. And she says, I really think you should take a look at it. And that's when things started to change. So that's a kind of a long description of where I've been, but hopefully that's helpful.
That's very helpful, and thank you for openly sharing and painting the picture, because it's real, and I'm sure that there are so many people that can relate. And that long list of side effects or symptoms, or whatever you were dealing with, I can really, really pick up how hard it was, and even letters that you've been writing to yourself. It just shows how lost we can get, and especially when we don't have the right environment and the right support that oftentimes we seek. But even with the best treatments out there, unfortunately, we end up not getting. And so what I'm hearing is that your wife kind of opened up this opportunity to tap into the ketogenic diet as a potential area of treatment. And I'm curious to hear, what was your initial thought about it? Were there any concerns? And if so, what those were, right? Like very not the traditional type of psychiatric treatment
Right.
there. So yeah, tell us more about what were your like genuine initial thoughts about this intervention?
It's funny that you asked that because I just was reminded of my daughter. My daughter was going for public health degree, and one of the classes was nutrition. Strangely enough, what she came out of that as a whole was that ketogenic is very bad for you.
Yeah.
Basically, Dad, what you're doing is you're putting your body in a situation where it thinks it's going to die. And so those are kind of things like, well, I don't know that I'm going to try this stuff because my daughter should know. She just went to school. And besides the fact, I get to the point where, you know what, I've disappointed the kids. I don't want to do something that's going to upset them. So I kind of was going down that path. But when Stacy came into it and told me about it, I was like, you know what, I should really dig into this. But I did have concerns, cholesterol, all the different areas. So I didn't have all the transformation evoked and all the resources that you had available. So I kind of went into it like saying, okay, I just need to do a lot of blood work and see what my baseline is. I at least had enough wherewithal to do that. And, then kind of went from there. So again, concerns. And I think that even as recent as some of our previous meetings, I'm like, well, you know what, this cholesterol thing, how do I cut out dairy and the like? So yeah, a lot of concerns. My family has a history, 46 years old. My uncle passed of heart condition. My grandmother passed at 49 of a heart condition. And my parents had quintuple and triple bypass surgeries. So yeah, of course I was afraid.
Yeah, and that's totally the case with all of us, right? I was there as well. For me, it was like 3 months where I had to go over extensive research to convince myself that fat is safe and cholesterol and all of that. And so with that being said, it really takes someone who needs a solution, right? At least from my experience, like you really must need it more than you fear it, kind of a thing.
Right.
And so how did you overcome it, and how did you get started with the diet? What was that process like for you?
Well, I overcame. Well, here's the thing. I am a cold turkey guy. Okay. I'm not really good at like doing things partially. And when I went vegan, it was 8 years worth, and I did it cold turkey. So if you think about it, eating meat, eating all kinds of stuff, and then just saying, okay, everything out of the pantry, this is what we're going to do. It was a huge change. I watched, like, I think it was called Game Changer or something like that, was a video where they were showing the benefits of a vegan diet. But following that, I came to, realize that as far as the keto is concerned, I went down that same path. I says, okay, I'm going to do this cold turkey. And in doing it cold turkey, that was kind of my approach. So I don't know if I answered the question. Did I go down a different path?
Yeah, no, that's fine. You started like cold turkey, but in terms of thoughts, were you, by the time you started, were you still afraid of what it's gonna do for you? I guess I'm trying to figure
Well,
out.
I'm sorry. Yeah. At that point in time, I was like, I got to do something. I mean, these things that are going on, I've got to do something about it. So really at that point in time, I essentially did the mental switch that I'm going to do this, but I still had all those concerns. I still was like, how do I do this? What am I going to do? And the like.
Yeah. Okay. And then you started cold turkey. And do you have any idea of what amount of carbohydrates you were eating before that?
I honestly don't. And the only thing that I had to go by is I went to a keto lifestyle movie or one of the sessions with you, and I was sitting there going, "Hey, what do we have to have? What is the appropriate ketones? What is everything supposed to be? What is how much fat? How much this? How much that?" So I was trying to do some research, but at the same time, I had already started. So I was kind of backtracking. I knew enough to get the urine strips. I was like, oh my God, I think I'm in ketoacidosis. I don't know what's going on here. Everything was bright red, and I didn't even know how to read the urine strips. So it was kind of nuts, drinking through a fire hose, figuring this thing out.
Yeah. But that just shows your commitment to getting better, right? Like,
Right.
from a place where you've tried so much and nothing worked, and it's almost like the last option, or at least at that time, that has the opportunity to potentially work, or we want to trust it will. And and I think it's as important it is to do it safely. I also relate to that moment, like having that momentum, really like trusting, wanting this to work, and starting it, even if it's not ideal, if it's not perfect. I also did take kind of figure things out as I go in terms of what foods are ketogenic. And even though it took me like a really long time to prepare and read research and all of that, I still was not completely ready when I kind of started. And I think that's going to be the case for a lot of people potentially as well. But yeah, that implication of doing it safely, it is important. And so what did you experience once you were on the diet? How did you feel? And what was that like, again, compared to where you were before? And did everything else stay the same? Medication, lifestyle? Did just keto change?
Right.
And if so, how did it impact your whole life?
The lifestyle with keto was starting to change, but it wasn't fully where it needed to be. So as far as that is concerned, like when I went cold turkey, I was doing some silly things, like I get to the end of the day and I haven't hit what I wanted to for the fats and that kind of thing. So one story I have is that I was going down to go and shop with my wife. It was Christmas time or something. We were going Christmas shopping, and I got to the end of the day and said, "Honey, I got to eat fat. Like I got to get fat in before I go, because I'm not going to get it in for the day. I got to get my 80% in." And so I went to the MCT oil, and I went to the olive oil, and I think I took 5 to 8 tablespoons of it, like all at once. So I'm shopping, I'm like, honey, I just don't feel good. I have no idea. Oh my God, what's the matter? And I just was feeling all out of whack. So I've done some pretty silly things in that regard. As far as the lifestyle, I was doing some exercises, honestly, pretty intensive, but I was working out with some guys that were like 35 years old, and I got to the point where I just couldn't keep up. I ended up with bulging discs and everything else. So I had to kind of scale back and figure that out. Are you interested in like a regimen of what it is that I'm doing, or?
Yeah. Tell us what that looks like.
So my regimen used to be, just going crazy, trying to track everything on my fitness pal, driving my wife crazy. Hey, you know what? You got to get the recipes exact. You have to understand, this is my prescription. We got to get this right. So she was all stressed out. I was stressed out, tracking everything. So the first thing I did is, aside from, the exercise and that kind of thing, I made sure that I was considering the diet differently. And as soon as I said, I'm not going to be perfect with this, but keep on going, keep on plugging away. In doing that, I, determined that, plugging through and not being perfect reduced my stress. And in reducing my stress, it had an effect on the ketones and different things. So I started to get to the high levels of therapeutic ketosis. So all that was good. As far as the regimen is concerned, now what I do is, I have a set schedule. I know that in the morning, if I didn't get up or get going, the whole day was a mess. So I try to get better sleep. I'm trying to be on a schedule. As far as preparing for the evening, I don't watch any TV. I don't get crazy with screens. If I am doing anything, I have the amber colored glasses, in the morning and at night. I have a real regimen in the morning where I get up, I weigh myself, I check my ketones and everything else, make sure I'm in a good level so I can think about, because I write things down, but I don't put it in my fitness pal. So then I can think about, what did I eat the day before? Did I get good rest? What is going on? And it's been pretty good. But then after I do that, I just go and sit down with I make homemade kefir. I don't know what the pronunciation, some people say kefir, but I make that homemade every day, just to help them, the gut biome. And then I essentially sit down with my wife and we listen to devotionals on an app called Glorify. She heads off to work. I go and work out and, just keep busy throughout the day. One of those things is make my bed. Like if I don't make my bed after 14 months of bedridden depression at one point, and then 4 weeks of it, it just gets, out of hand. Like you have to make your bed. You have to do things.
Yeah, I love that you acknowledge the power of circadian rhythms first, is what I'm
Right.
hearing, right? Like reducing screen exposure and having a schedule for sleep, and also those tiny habits. And even like you mentioned there, that your kind of success started when you realized you're not going to be perfect with the diet, which again goes back to favoring progress and not perfection, but also every little thing that we do in a manner of caring, of investing in our health matters. And such a small thing like that may look small, right? Like making your bed. I love that. To me, that's like it's almost like a new identity of you, new version of you that now is ready to do better, to live life better. And that's one way to show yourself that you're no longer that past version that was bedridden for such a long time. And I just love that. I really do. And also what I'm hearing is that you are maintaining great connections, and like all the important things that are outside of just the diet, right? We call it a lifestyle. And
Right.
the diet is the most foundational piece of it, but there is so much more outside of it. And speaking of that, you mentioned kefir, and that's homemade, but what else? Would you maybe tell us about what a day look like? And is your regimen right now the same as it has always been, or have you ever experimented with different versions of the diet?
I work with a nutritionist. So the nutritionist even has the mindset, well, Tom, you can kind of play with these things once you get to the level of your therapeutic ketosis. But
Mm.
um, I kind of have found that it, it is pretty important. Like on the therapeutic, this is my personal experience. I don't know if there's any merit to it or if it's research, but I have found that I can be in a high level of therapeutic ketosis, but if I don't have my ratios right with my fat and my protein, then I end up kind of having a little bit of brain fog. I don't know what causes it, but I think I'm not giving my brain the energy it needs to get that fat up to the appropriate levels. So when my nutritionist says, you can kind of make these adjustments, I'm kind of coming back to her and saying, no, I kind of can't. Like I'm experiencing these things and I have to kind of keep it set. And that's just me personally. But again, the stress has, reducing the stress has been very helpful. The other things that I've kind of experimented with those concerns with cholesterol and that kind of thing, obviously Stacy is very concerned. You have your parents that, had heart issues and, whatever. So, I try to accommodate that. So I really, at the advice of some of the folks within your group, I started converting even that kefir over to a coconut based. So I don't use like all of the dairy, and the percentages of carbohydrates is lower. It doesn't really affect the taste much. In fact, I think I'm getting a better yield out of it with doing that. Some of the things I'm doing as well is I have been doing intermittent fasting, which I never did in my life. I'm kind of going with 2 main meals. And then as far as snacking, I'll do snacking, healthy snacks in between. But I don't do any of that processed stuff, keto friendly stuff. So I keep it really clean. Like I don't know what's in all those foods, obviously. So, I'm doing as much organic as I can. But, I'm finding that the fiber is super important as well. Fiber and hydration. So I make sure that I really get hydrated. As far as fiber is concerned, I'm usually doing a pretty decent salad with, a lot of meat in it. And a lot of times I'll incorporate other things into it, like a soup that I made with like coconut milk, or, make sure that's included in there. Get a good amount of meat, but not crazy amounts. So I kind of keep that under control. And that's actually been one of the challenges for me, is that when I went to vegan, I lost about 20 pounds. When I went to keto, I lost about another 10. And I'm to the point right now where I'm super lean and fit, but it's like, you know what, I could stand to have a couple more pounds on my bones. You look a little thin, people go, oh, you look emaciated. I'm like, well, guess what's going on the inside? The inside's doing really well. So I'm going to stick with it. So other things that I say I do, I would say that as far as the diet is concerned, anytime I'm eating something, I just think about how can I incorporate fat into this. So as an example, if I were to use, let's say, a mayonnaise or something like that, which I found a really good one that doesn't have bad stuff in it. But if I were to do that, I just replace everything with olive oil. If I'm making like, let's say a tuna or something like that, I don't use I'll use like avocado, but I use olive oil. I find ways to incorporate it in without drinking 5 of them all at once at the end of the day. It's incorporated throughout the day.
Yeah, yeah. And you're also saying that higher levels of ketosis not necessarily mean you're feeling better. How do you feel when you're at your optimal range? How would you describe that?
Everything's firing, okay, but it's a different kind of firing. Like when I get to a really high level of ketones, I start to get scattered. Like I start to get to where, things are a little too much. Like I had too many things going on, and then there isn't that calm energy. It's kind of more of a scattered energy, even though I'm productive, but it's not healthy. Like I don't ever feel like really calm. So I have to be kind of in a sweet spot. And for me, it's kind of been like 2.5 on the ketones. And, I got to a point once where I was 53 on the glucose, and the Keto Mojo gave me an indicator. Wait, that's red. You're a little too low on that. But then my ketones were like 4.3. So it was like I was a little scattered. I don't know like why I was scattered at that point in time, but I was. And I came to the conclusion, I think it's when you get to a level of ketones that isn't like good for you, then I think it does, create a little bit more scattering. When I'm really on, like I said, it's calm energy. I'm accomplishing things. I'm not, when I tend to get too high, I'm doing things faster than other people are. So I get to the point, and those aren't symptomatic at this point of what I was going through with the bipolar diagnosis and the like. It's different because when I got scattered like that, I would not get anything done. There would be projects everywhere and just would not get them done. But with that, you're trying to do things, more things in a period of time that is kind of unrealistic. So the people around you kind of experiencing this person that's doing stuff. And like if they get in the way, you kind of tend to, oh no, I'm doing this. I know I got to do all these different things, and you know what you want to do, but it's like, hey, you know what, Tom? Maybe you can scale back on that. Some of the people in your group, like Shannon, she says, would you be able to stop that if somebody says, hey, can you scale back on that? And if you can, it means that you kind of have control of it. If you can't, it means that it's taking control of you. So there's times that I ask myself now, can I just stop this? Could I just stop this right now? And I do. So that's kind of the difference.
I love that. That's such an important marker to identify, because even with the bipolar type 2, we know that hypomania can look very sneaky, sort
Right.
of speaking, right? Like it can look like as being very productive and energetic and doing a lot of things. And initially with the diet, some people even experience symptoms, and being able to differentiate between what this productiveness comes from, where it comes from. Is it a symptom of the mental illness, or is it the effects of the diet? Because we know how powerful those are. And even with some people, especially in the initial stages when we cannot touch medication as much, right? Because it depends. Everyone is different and doing different things, I guess. But a lot of people keep their same levels of medication, and now introducing this powerful intervention, that adds up a whole different level of benefits, and that may lead to slightly hypomanic symptoms. And I love the way that you are describing your way of differentiating between the two. That's very
Right.
important, I think. Amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, titration is one of the things that has kind of been a challenge with, with my family, because it's like they've gotten to the point where they think it's been helpful, but internally I'm like, this is not doing anything for me. Like I'm not getting the benefit of the medication of what it indicates. In fact, I'm getting these symptoms that are driven by the medication. And, so that part has been kind of challenging, kind of difficult, because, because there's all this paradigm that's out there. And I've gotten to the point, with that where I said, I told Stacy, I'm giving you authority to like have some kind of like code word to let me know, that I'm not like, I need to kind of reevaluate where I'm at, kind of a thing. And I think the word we came up with is, you might be, what's it called? She hasn't used it very much, so I'm forgetting what it was. You might be having a little bit of a distortion. I think, yeah, distortion. So that was the word I says. If you just say I have a distortion, but then it evolved into, well, Tom, are you okay? And she turned it into that and says, that's much better, because you're actually inquiring. You're not saying you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. So, that's been helpful in, and kind of like working toward, addressing some of the medication stuff. In fact, my goal is to titrate off, and we're working on that, with the psychiatrist and with the I have a nutritionist, I have a psychiatrist, I have a biblical counselor, I have a regular counselor, and I have my family. So they're all kind of on board now, because Stacy came to realize that when I read off the list, she goes, wow, that's really interesting that all these symptoms you have were actually side effects of the medication. So I have a champion now, in the titration process.
Yeah. And that's such an important thing for people to know, I think, right? I always have been such a big stand for lifestyle medicine and personal power and claiming rights over our health. And just for me, that whole notion of prescribing medication, I do honestly believe they have a space if in urgent situations. But it's also important to understand that they are not meant to be a long-term solution that heals the root of the problem. Not only that, but they come with tons of side effects that building up over time only lead us to then take another medication to now heal the side effect of the initial one. And it can get to a point where people are on a huge amount of medications that were created to treat symptoms that were side effects from the initial medication. And that to me is just not a good way to approach health. And I know you have come to that realization in your own experience. And I think that's why we are where we are with this type of conversation. Let's get to the root. Let's address healing, not management symptom, and adding more medication and all of that. And oftentimes, Tom, it does not look great. Like it's a lot easier to get a medication rather than following a somewhat strict regimen that requires you to not eat out as much, probably weighing your food, measuring ketones, right? Like it's a serious commitment. It really takes someone who wants to do that. But when we see that anything else hasn't really worked, we come to that point where we're ready. Not everyone is that, but I just see you as being one of those people, just as myself and everyone else that comes to our meetup to willing to claim our rights and do something. Can we do something about our health? And ketogenic diet is one of the things.
Yeah, 24 years was enough for me to be ready.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you have to go through, some people have to just go through like really crazy tragedy, and everybody has what they call rock bottom.
Yeah.
And you get to the point where now you're ready. And the thing that's good about that is when you're ready, you're convicted, like you're ready to do it. And I think that's what allows this to be successful, is because there's a lot of naysayers out there. Well, what are you going to, how are you going to do it? You can't even feed yourself right now. You can't make your own food. You're laying in bed. Like, how are you going to do this? But there's just something that gets you going. And for me, it had such profound, change for me that at that point it was easy to make the decision.
Mm-hmm. I often refer to that effect as what you're getting out of it is times and times better than what you're giving up, in terms of, yes, now you have to follow a schedule and eat high fat and weight and measure and all of that, but how you feel, and that sense of you now have a say in terms of how well you're going to feel. I think that's really profound.
And what's important to mention is that I know that it works. And I don't know that it works just because it's all been, roses and happiness and all that. I've actually had instances where I got off of the lifestyle and it had detrimental effects. As an example, like I hadn't gone out to eat very much. Stacy we hadn't gone out to eat. And then we got to the point where it's like, oh, we're going to go to a nice restaurant. I can get things off the menu. Okay, I'm going to kind of like, I'm looking at the vegetables and going, hey, you know what? I want to make sure that I'm not doing too many and this and that. And then at the end of it, I said, well, there's cake, there's desserts. Are you interested in any of those? And she says, no, we can't eat any of that stuff. And I says, well, honey, I don't know what I was thinking. I says, honey, I found a flourless cake and a mousse cake. She goes, oh. And I said, do you want the sliver or do you want the slice? She goes, oh, let's get the slice. So I'm sitting there going, oh my goodness. All right, I'm gonna eat some of this. You get to the point, Donica, where you're like, you only have like an eighth of the cake left or like something less. And you go, I can't put this in a doggy bag, and you finish it, right? And then the following day, I had a taste testing for my daughter's wedding. And you have to decide among 3 things of everything what one you're going to like. Now, I didn't go crazy and eat everything of everything that they gave, but I wanted to sample, I wanted to taste it and be able to give her a good indication as to what seems as though it tasted well and what would people enjoy. So I did that. That was on a Friday and a Saturday. By Monday, I was in bedridden depression. I just had consumed so much carbs, I think, that was different than what I had, that it just threw me for a loop. And I know that, people says, oh, when I miss a day, I just kind of got it back on track. Not the case for me. It was crazy, the implications that it had. So I know it works. I mean, it works dramatically in my instance.
Yeah, and that is also a big one, another big one. So do you mind sharing a little bit more about how you got back on track?
Well, interesting enough, the nutritionist that I had like an appointment like scheduled with her. And I says, listen, I'm having this problem. She's just fantastic, saying, well, what can we do? How do we get you back? So, for me, my nutritionist has been amazing, and that has helped me out. I mean, I knew the things, but she always comes up and says, how do we make this easier? How do we incorporate things that are easy to grab or easy to, to get at? So that's kind of the way I got out. I don't know. It's almost as if something happens where you're just like, this is enough. Like what is going on here? And then you just kind of like muscle through it a little bit. You get the support you need externally, if you're not thinking straight or whatever, and then you just get back on track. You get up, back on the horse, because you know what it can be like. It can be good. So, that's what the driver is for me.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, what did that look like for you? Because I personally have experimented with getting out of ketosis very rarely, but I kind of, because of that fear, right? Like I didn't want my symptoms to come back. Yet, whenever I had an occasion where I would eat carbohydrates freely, right? And then try to come back. In one occasions where I just tried to do it with food, it took me really like probably a week just eating organic friendly food, versus other times was really fasting and exercise when I would speed it up, and maybe within a day or two I'll be back. And by that time I'm just begging myself to do whatever I can as aggressively as I can, just so that I can get back to a mental state of mind where I feel good and I feel like I can deal with life and I don't have to experience those horrible symptoms. So do you mind sharing more about what was it like for you? So you introduced a lot of carbs, and like what did you do and how long did it take you to be back to where you were?
Well, the thing that happened is, with that depression, it's hard to like do anything. So you're just trying to find things, you're getting up, trying to eat and the like. But as far as getting back onto it, that's when I kind of came into it and says, you know what, that was really stressful before this. It was just too much tracking, too much going into it. That's when I decided I'm not going to track this stuff on my Fitness Pal. I know what I'm supposed to do. I know that I have to eat more fat. That's when I started just incorporating it into things a little bit better. So, in doing that, it kind of, for me, it wasn't as hard to kind of get back to that because it was less stressful. I was writing things down that I was eating just so I knew, hey, did you eat enough fat today? Have you been a little, balanced as you look at it? And for me, that was one of the things that helped me get back. So I put it this way, I had somewhat of a foundation. I had what not to do. Okay. So it helped me with what to do. And the drive that you have, because you've gotten benefits, from it before, that's also a big component of it. That's part of the driver. So.
Yeah, right. Instead of moving, I mean, it's both moving towards something better, but also moving away from something that doesn't feel good. I think
Yeah.
it's perfect mix that helps us stay on track.
Right.
And so thank you so much, Tom. I think this was like really helpful, but what is something else that you may think you want to share if there is someone listening who is considering this type of a treatment, and maybe it's just like you, right? Like potentially even have tried the diet but are not able to stay on it, or still have those like cardiology concerns that we all knew and had before we look into the latest research and know better. I guess, based on your own experience and challenges that you have overcome, what are the biggest lessons that you learned that helped you be successful with the diet and support yourself in feeling better?
I think one of the important things is to really really do your research, really get involved in a community like this that has experienced some of the issues, that can help you get to, truths, I guess, faster, because it's a long, drawn out process when you're just trying to figure it out on your own, and you feel like you're on an island and you're trying to make things happen, make things work. And I think, with that additional research, when you go into a specialist, you're kind of loaded with information that a lot of times they have no idea. In fact, most times they really don't know. Go to a cardiologist, the first thing they're going to put you on when they see family history, they see high cholesterol, and they see that you have some calcium, they're going to say, you need to be on a statin. So to be able to kind of dispute that and go, wait a minute, you know what? I don't eat like my parents. I don't do all these different things. I exercise and they didn't. That whole family history mindset just pays into every generation being, kind of restricted and thinking that medication is the way to go. And I'm not saying, again, medication is good in certain instances, but in mine, it didn't work. So I think what I would leave people with is advocate, research, be in community that understands this, that can bring you to the solutions quicker and help you to have those conversations with the specialist that are more productive, and you don't feel defeated and go down a path that isn't going to be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Super valuable. I agree with all of it. And in terms of the future, where do you think you see yourself with the diet?
There's a couple things I see. First thing I see is enjoying and being present at my daughter's wedding in July. Okay. And that I have not been present, mentally and until the last 6 months. So that is like fantastic, just amazing. You look forward to, the father-daughter dance and, what is it going to be, and just being there and interacting, having fun. The second thing I see myself doing is following that, because there's the concerns, hey, what's going to happen if you don't, if you do it too early or whatever, is to titrate and get to the point where I have all these folks involved and helping me with that process, and, encouraging me, hopefully, and recognizing what can and can't happen, and just being there to be a set of eyes for me, to let me know, and for me to be very open to that. And the last thing I think in it, I want to be more productive in the work that I do. I know I've learned a lot about maybe what didn't suit me, even though you tried and created stress in trying to do it among all the different jobs that I've done. So I've come to identify like where my passion truly is. And my goal is to just run like a stallion down that path and start, doing it, and start, getting to the point where you're supporting the people, that are in need and that type of thing. Beyond ketogenic and that kind of thing, because you guys got tremendous community out there. But I'm interested in, more so helping youth and, through the difficult times in life, and helping them grow and mentor them and that kind of thing. So that's where I see myself. But you got to have sound mind. You got to be healthy to do it all. So I'm on that path.
I love hearing that. And I truly and honestly hope that it's just such a beautiful way to be able to help yourself. And from that place, then you reach out and help others. It's, I think, the most natural thing that we all as human beings are designed to do.
Right.
But so many people sometimes outsource that and want to help others without helping their own self. And I love that you have found a sustainable way to take care of yourself and be open to support and feedback. And I just love hearing your story and where you are. And I hope it all goes well for you. And I wish you best of luck with your future projects. And thank you for your time, for sharing openly. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.